Hello, ODAC fans, and welcome to our latest edition of ODAC Chat. My name is JJ Neckloff. I'm the Associate Commissioner with the Old Dominion Athletic Conference, and we're going to continue on our track and field and cross-country run over the last couple weeks here and talk with Brandon Spalding, the head men's cross-country coach at Washington Lee University. He's also the chair of the ODAC men's and women's cross-country coaches. Brandon, how are you doing today?
Hey, JJ, thanks for having me on and asking me to join.
Absolutely. Looking forward to talking to you about the other side of our track and field and cross-country world a little bit here. And you're obviously going to focus on cross-country for us, so let's go ahead and hop right into it. You and Mike Dager, the women's coach at Washington Lee University, have won 5 straight ODAC titles apiece. 5 men's titles since 2015, 5 women's titles since 2015. Talk about, maybe more specifically from you, but talk a little bit about building those championships over the time that you've been in charge of them and what it's taken to basically have a group that stood at the top of the ODAC standings for the last half decade.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we've been fortunate enough to be on this run that we are for both the men's and women's program right now. But, when I think back to the start of it, we each inherited different situations. I took over for John Tucker after he retired after the 2012-13 season. And, I inherited low numbers, but, we had some key individuals as a part of the start of that process when it comes to, Kane Thomas, Jacob Strauss, Mark Ginsburg, Levi Waring, that really, put us moving in the right direction. And I think that, Dager would say the same about, like a Rachel Steffen, Rachel Solomon, that really started that progression for the women's program. And, maybe they weren't there to see it out when it comes to, all 5 titles or getting to the national championships, but it really starts with key individuals and that growth over time. And we've had a lot of buy-in from, both sides of our program, and we're really excited to see, where that goes in the future.
Well, I know you've got a new facility there at Washington Lee, and I'm sure you've had to expand the mantle space for not just your programs, but for all the programs at Washington Lee, and specifically cross-country. I'm sure you've got a bigger wall for that because that also includes individual awards. And if we take a look at over the 5 championship seasons, the women have earned 14 All-ODAC first-team honors, so that's runners that have finished 1 through 7 in the championship. Talk a little bit about that from the women's side, if you will, for Coach Dager, that he's had multiple first-team honorees and most recently a champion last season in Sarah Stevenson.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Dager's first recruiting class, bringing in the names of, Maggie Siebold, Sam Yates, that really started it for him when it came to those, All-ODAC honors and, those 2 women getting to the national championships. And obviously that progressed into the team that they were this past year. We were all very excited for him to get to the national championship with a region title. They had come close on a number of years, but finally broke through. And that was a big step for him. And as you mentioned, someone like Sarah Stevenson, leading the charge for him, finishing runner-up at the region championships. I mean, frankly, the ODAC's only had 2 women's teams qualify for the national meet, WNL being the second this past year. And really, I would say they're the best team in ODAC history. Last to qualify was 1998, the Lynchburg squad then. But, Mike's in a really good spot with his women. And I think they're in a great spot for the future and numbers and their growth. And, having someone like, Sarah Stevenson leading them up front, both on the course and on the track is going to be really strong for them here in the years to come.
Yeah, well, talking about strength, I mean, you're absolutely right about kind of the progression and the history of the sport on the women's side, but you're doing the same on the men's side over that same 5 championship spread, 16 All-ODAC first-team honorees, and you've got a champion mixed in there with Max Strahler one of the seasons. Talk a little bit about the growth of your program and some of the individuals that have really highlighted and built this stretch that you've had over the last half decade.
Yeah, certainly. I mentioned some of those names earlier that really started this progression for our program and getting us on this streak that we're on. Funny enough, someone like Levi Waring, who was a national qualifier for us in 2014, right before we started, the streak that we're on of conference championships, he was only ever a second-team all-conference guy, both his junior and senior year. It's ironic that, we're talking about the first team guys, but sometimes it's not necessarily that guy up front who has that day for you at regionals. But Levi really got us started on this progression to, make it possible for us to, for guys under him to believe we could win conference championships, get to the national meet in that regard. And, we've had a kind of a funny streak in the last 5 years that we've always had a runner-up. And you mentioned Max Strahler winning in 2016, and certainly someone like Mac winning the title, that was just really catapulting us forward into that season. I mean, that was an exciting fall for us, qualifying for the national meet. That was the first time it happened in 21 years for the program, and really set that precedent of who we want to be in the future. And we've still had those first team runners, the all conference, all region nominees, a couple of those guys getting back to nationals in 2017. But unfortunately, we've been on the outside looking in as a team for the past few years, missing by one spot. And I know we're going to get to it in a little bit, but certainly we kind of had some heavy hearts when it came to missing out on this season, because in last December we're looking at the team we have returning and saying, well, we only graduated our number 5, being right. Austin Kenny last year. So we were very excited heading into this fall, but certainly there's still a lot to be excited about within our development for the years to come, and hopefully when we get back on the course this time next fall.
Yeah, before we get into some more ODAC cross-country details, let's take a quick word from one of our sponsors, Virginia Farm Bureau Insurance.
With over 100 local offices, Virginia Farm Bureau agents are part of your community. If you want insurance from a company that knows you, get to know us.
Well, Brandon, we certainly appreciate our friends at Virginia Farm Bureau Insurance. They help us stay on the course and in all the championships that we host in the ODAC, so we appreciate them. And as we take a look at what's upcoming here for this spring, we're in a situation here that's not ideal. None of us thought we'd ever be in a situation like this, but we've got to deal with it coming through. Cross country, track and field, generally they're split up into really the 3 seasons here, with cross country in the fall. Indoor track and field kind of spans the fall to the winter and early spring, and then the outdoor season in the spring. Now all 3 potentially in the spring together here coming up in spring 21. Talk a little bit about what something like that could look like. Obviously nothing is in stone here right now just yet, and still talking about options, but what are some of those discussions that we've had about talking about how to get maybe a version of all 3 done, or maybe a version of cross country and a full track and field season, whether it's indoor or outdoor split or not?
Right. Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned, obviously unfortunate to miss the fall, not just for cross country athletes, but all of our conference athletes in the fall. And we're in an unfortunate time right now. And I know that every school is trying to do the best they can. And, you all as the conference office is trying to do the best to work with our administrators to, make sure we can still have opportunities. And maybe it's not championship, and maybe it's just competition. I know our athletes are eager to get back to that regardless of what sport they play. But yeah, as you mentioned, we're trying to come up with some unofficial plans when it comes to a potential maybe winter cross-country season that we're having some informal discussions about. I think the overwhelming goal when it comes to our coaching body is that if we can make it to an outdoor season and, not try to have a round 2 of all of this, of missing outdoor track season again. Cross-country, this was just the first time. Indoor, for right now, indoor is still planned. The NCAA came out with a statement yesterday to just reduce minimums and reduce the championship size for all winter sports. Maybe that's positive moving ahead, and we'll all wait and see, what the world looks like after the first year. But yeah, I would say right now it's just more informal conversations when it comes to, how we would do cross country just to add those opportunities for our athletes for competition, mixed into, whatever an indoor track season might look like. I mean, I think we all realize that the indoor spacing is not going to be ideal, and our best chance is going to be outdoor. And I think that might have to look like some, reduced field sizes, reduced team sizes. It's certainly not going to be ideal, but I think these larger invitationals that we're used to might be a thing of the past.
Yeah, and I think those are the same discussions that, we've had obviously with the coaches' chairs and whatnot, and thinking about coaches' meeting here coming up in October to really get into the meat of those details. But I know that you all have already been thinking about how to host like specific events. So cross-country meets, track and field meets, that sort of thing. So let's stick to the cross-country side. We're thinking about being able to host some events here in the spring. What are some of the adjustments that might have to be made, and some of the things to put in place to actually compete some of these meets, whether they, depending on what size we can do, let's take size out of it, because it's probably going to need to happen regardless of the size of the meets, that there'll be some sort of adjustment needed.
Yeah, I think, we can look at smaller pods of meets, 3 to 5 teams, spacing them out every other box when it comes to the starting area. I know some high schools and college meets that are going on around the country. They're exploring things that have a shoot where certain athletes go in one side, certain go in another side, just to space them out at a finish area. We've all seen that, but I mean, once they're out on a course, that's one thing. The great thing about our sport is that we have a lot of space in that regard. And yeah, maybe it's the beginning of the race that people are crowded together, but having boxes separated, I think, could help. And those are going to be ideas that we're going to be discussing on, if this is going to be possible to happen in the winter, early spring, but certainly trying to prevent that overlap with track and field, because certainly our cross country athletes, they're going to contribute in our distance events if they want to get back to running mid distance events or 5Ks and 10Ks, and we want to hopefully have those opportunities for those athletes.
Absolutely. An opportunity is, I think, the operative word here is we're looking for things to try to put these into place, because we want to see you all compete, and we want to see the ODAC cross country men's and women's side out there, because we've really had some great growth in the sport over the last half decade, last 15 years. It's really taken off, both in new schools adding the sport, and then the depth from each of those teams, and then the quality of the depth is kind of raised, if you will. Talk a little bit about what you've seen from ODAC cross country here, both in terms of team and individuals. With you've got plenty of experience having been a runner and a coach in the league now. Talk a little bit about some of that growth that you've seen from a conference perspective.
Yeah, certainly. When I start with the women's side of things, I mean, obviously we mentioned Mike's women qualifying this past year was just a big step for the conference overall. Raising that level. We've had a number of teams, including Bridgewater's women, finishing one spot out of the national meet within the last 10 years. When I mentioned their program, Olivia Mills being an All-American in 2012. Certainly more recent memory, ODAC coaches have Calista Ariel and English Jackson coming to mind on all of the accolades they've been able to achieve. But Lynchburg and Caitlin Johnson being All-American, we know that just the plethora of awards that Hannah Chapeldick at EMU was able to earn, and also having an All-American honor in cross country. And it's certainly been a great growth for the conference, on the women's side, to just raise that level on where our teams are in the region rankings, national qualifiers. And I mean, similarly, it's been the same on the men's side. There's been 3 All-Americans in the last 8 years. Cody Stanton from Lynchburg, Chad Norton from Guilford, and more recently Harrison Toney in 2015. But then you have someone like Jamie Hegel, a 3-time national qualifier. We've obviously had our team sneak in there in 2016, and Max Trailer, Mackenzie Leroy, and then having Cooper Baird and Hank being individual qualifiers as well. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just an expectation within our conference that we're going to have, at least a couple ODAC teams in the top 4 to 5 of the region every year. Hopefully a team getting to the national meet. But there's only 7 qualifiers that come out of the region, and typically I'd say at least 3 or 4 of them are ODAC athletes, both on the women and men's side. And I mean, it's been a great progression for the league. And I know I guess the term across the country when it comes to cross country in the South is that we're the weakest region in the country, but that really hasn't been true in the last few years. Both women and men, and it starts with a lot of our athletes having that national presence and being All-American, and we hope that we can all change that and continue to make our region one of the more competitive in the country.
Absolutely, and I think it's been great on what the ODAC schools have done individually and teams in the region, go and really perform well at the national meets. And we thank you for joining us today to be able to talk about some of those details and what we might be able to look forward. So, Brandon, thanks very much for hopping on the ODAC Chat here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and stay safe.
Absolutely. ODAC fans, stay tuned for our next edition of ODAC Chat.